so with that, we will make a start. So thank you, Bilal. We open the floor to you for the first presentation to
All right.
deliver on autism and personality. So thank you very much. Over to you.
So, yeah, so thank you, Mitchell, for giving me this opportunity. So I'm gonna share my screen now very quick. All right, so thank you very much. My name is Bilal Bentchakal, and today we're gonna talk about personality and autism and the relationship between the two. Um, so here's a bit of background about me. So I'm deputy head of fundraising. Um, so I graduated last year with in marketing from the University of Westminster, and I have an interest, generally speaking, in social sciences. So like sociology, psychology. That's why I have this interest for neurodiversity, but not only. So like today we're going to talk about personality. There's like a link between the two, more or less. But yeah, that's why like I'm really happy to be here and then to do this presentation. So we're gonna watch a very short clip here of two people on the autism spectrum, and you will see why later on.
That's why I want to go out with her and I love her very much. That's why I want to go out with her and help her in life and all that. So your turn to talk now.
Well, I don't really know what to say.
You need to talk to the camera, Zoe. I'm trying to help you, Zoe.
Dad, why are you so crazy?
She always calls me angry dad. Sometimes.
He loves it.
If I've done something wrong, she calls out, "Hey, angry dad." And I was over the moon when she calls me angry dad. She steals food off me. And I'm thinking, where's my food gone? I've been robbed. And she says, "Come and get it, Jack, come and get it."
What is next for Jack and Zoe?
Do you want to stay with me for a long time, Zoe?
Well, I think about it.
She'll think about it.
Is Jack your favorite person?
Yes.
Why is that, Zoe?
Because you're a crazy friend.
Is a kind, friendly person and outgoing and cheeky and really good smile and all that. I just want to date her forever.
There you go. So that was the video, and there's a reason why I asked you for this, because we can see both of them are on the spectrum, but we can see like the way they interact with each other, there's a difference in what we call personality. So maybe like maybe you can raise your hand very quickly. Like, what do you think like the difference is between the two? Or maybe you can unmute your mic and maybe like anyone maybe have like an idea what like difference between Jack and Zoe?
Yep. So essentially with Jack, he appears to be more sort of the confident one out of the two. So yes, I'll say that's the main difference between the two.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty much spot on, but yeah, that does you can see like Jack is more outgoing, more like maybe people oriented, like he ask her questions like that. Was Zoe is like more reserved. So yeah, so if we like look at like in detail, so one is extroverted, the other one is introverted. One is more like people oriented, more physical, so like the way he touch like himself, like he's always scratching like his his body, like he has like a body awareness, where she's like you can see that she's creative, she's genuine, maybe not as people oriented as Jack, but yeah. So basically, what I wanted to show is like there's personality, even though like both of them can be like on the spectrum, you can have like a difference of personality. So as for like the intended learning outcomes for this session, we define what personality is. So we know kind of know what it is, but we're gonna define it. We're gonna also like identify the different personality systems out there and discuss the relationship between personality and autism. So what is personality? So personality, according to this definition of the American Psychological Association, it refers to the enduring. And I want you to focus on the enduring. What it means, like, it's something that it stays like for a really, really long time. It's not like something that you have for just a short period of time. So like an enduring characteristic of behavior that comprise a person's unique adjustment to life, including major trait, interest, drives, value, motivations, ability, emotional patterns, concept, etc. So all of this, but it has to be enduring. To something that you see, for example, someone has when he's a teenager, where the same person when he's older still has that trait or ability or interest. So that would be like a personality. So if we go like to the history of personality and how will we define it, um, if you realize the definition is kind of broad and kind of like not really specific, that's because even the research around personality is kind of new, is a new phenomenon. So the earliest trace of personality research come from Hippocrates, 400 BC, 400 years before Christ, and he divided like in four traits, and that's something that stayed for like decades and centuries until Sigmund Freud, who came up, with the a different idea with the human psychology, with the id, the ego, the superego, the unconscious, for example, like different layers of the human psychology. And from this research came Carl Jung, who specialized into the psychologist, the personality side of psychology. So and he came up with the functions and well, how we perceive and judge things. And from this, so he came up with a system. And then Myers-Briggs came in just few years later, where they start developing the MBTI. And then we have in 1985 the famous Big Five, or the Ocean model, which is to this day the only scientific model. And you can see this with this model here, for example. So you have all of this, despite, for example, Sigmund Freud or Carl Jung being, no one would argue that they are not scientific, but in the modern use of the term scientific, the theories have not been tested on a large scale. So technically speaking, they are still pseudoscience, not really scientific. So that's why, the MBTI, the eight functions, Sigmund Freud, Carl, even Hippocrates, that's still pseudoscience, that's still theory, but that has not been tested on a large scale, unlike the Big Five, which has been developed by Costa and McRae in 1985. So that are really scientific compared to, to the other models. And so the first model we're going to see is the Hippocrates and Galen model, which was used like 400 BC. You can see it's really like, very basic, whether you are courageous or like, calm and emotional. So it's been used like in different variation actually for like generations, but it's kind of like divided by 4 all the time. And you can see it's kind of outdated. So the positive of having such models, like it's easy to use and really simple. So you can test yourself, like I'm extroverted, I'm people oriented, so I'm a sanguine, for example, or vice versa. I could be melancholic if I more task oriented and introverted. But the problem of this is really basic and archaic, and there's more to personality. We know interestingly that there's more to someone's personality than just 4 quadrant, for example. And so the second model, which is the big one, the famous one, the MBTI, or the 16 personality types. And for this one, basically what Myers-Briggs did, so Isabel Briggs and Myers, so the mom, so they basically divided this into 4 metrics. So you have the extroverted metric and the introversion. So you're like someone like, you're either more introverted or extroverted. And then you have intuition and sensing. So sensing is more like more like, into like real life, more like realistic, more like into a concrete version of life. But intuition, they're more like imaginative, more like into like, abstract ideas, for example. Thinking are more like, when they're taking decisions, are more like looking at the logical side of it, while the feeling is more like the emotional aspect of it. And judging is more like someone who is like organized, someone making plans, someone who's like having like a checklist, for example, where perceiving they're more going with the flow. So according to this, you decide like each letter, and then you have your MBTI. And with this combination, you have 16 combinations. And so you can have like 16 archetypes, so you can see here, which can be divided into like, 4 subgroups, so the analyst, the diplomat, the sentinel, the expert, which is kind of similar to the Hippocrates model. And but I'm gonna explain what this model is also kind of not up to date, in my opinion, Because, for example, in my experience, I have been gone through a lot of these models. So, for example, I thought I was an ISFJ initially. Then, for a long time, I was like, no, I'm not an ISFJ. I took the test again. I'm an INFJ. Then I took the test again. I'm an ENFJ. Then, no, I'm not really feeling. I'm more like a thinking type of person. I'm more intellectual, academic. So I must be an INTP. And I took another test. No, I must be an ENTP because I'm extroverted. And you never get something like concrete until now. I got ESS, ASTP. It's always like changing, and that's something you can see, with like the positive and negative. So it's really easy to use and really simple because if you look at the history of it, it was made. This model was made in purpose to make it easy and simple. But the negative is like super oversimplified, popular, not really academic, popular in the sense where people can use it, anyone can use it, but that if anyone can use it, it's not really academic or accurate in the scientific matter. And it is not undoing, meaning like if I take a test now, I can have like INFP, for example. But if I take a test, let's say in 2 weeks or 3 weeks, I may have something else, which is like the limiting aspect of it. Then we have the ocean model, which is the only scientific personality model that we have at the moment. So we have the openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. But the issue with this, and you can see, so the positive is scientific and simple again, but the problem is like the terms can be unclear and it is not undoing and specific. So for the unclear aspect of the term, so for example, for agreeableness, they look at something like empathy or whether someone is suspicious or not. But someone can be agreeable and really nice while also being suspicious at the same time. So it doesn't fit within agreeableness. That's the problem with the ocean model. Also, another problem is the fact that it's not undoing. Someone can have high neuroticism. Someone who is like, for example, is anxious or have like social anxiety, but over time he may work on that and become someone who is secure, confident, and calm. That's something I've seen in myself. For example, I was like, no, for example, I was super anxious, insecure when I was younger, like in my teenage years. But now I'm really confident, like when I speak and everything like that. So now, if I take the ocean test again, in the end aspect, I will score really low. Well, before I would score really high. So there's not undoing aspect of personality. And then we have the 8 functions, which was developed by Carl Jung initially, but that Myers-Briggs developed into the MBTI, which is different than the 8 functions. So we have the 8 functions. And so with the 8 functions, there are literally 2 schools of thought nowadays. So you have those who believe that if you have one function, you cannot have like one function extroverted, you cannot have it introverted. So if you have SE, you cannot have SI. And if you have SE, automatically you have NI. So like, it works like in pairs, something extroverted, introverted, But another group believe that you can have both of them. It's just that one is in the hero aspect of your thing, meaning like it is like, constant in your life, and one is in the shadow, so like behind the scene, only expressing itself in in a unique situation, like a stressful situations, for example. So for example, with let's say this YouTuber whose like name is C.S. Joseph, who developed this model. So you have the functions, you have the hero functions here. So for example, you have SETIFENI, and you can have them like expressed like almost like 90% of the time. But then you can have SITEFE and NE, for example, expressed like 10% of the time. So for example, someone with NE in demon, for example, it's not his main function, but he might express it like, in a demon function, which is, for example, he might be like really suspicious of others' intention, for example, according to C.S. Joseph's model, at least. Or someone, let's say, who is TE critic, meaning that he doesn't use TE that much, but when he uses it, he's really critical about how other thinks, for example, instead of using it in a positive way. That's for this school of thought. The second one, so the positive, of course, is it is intellectually stimulating and focus on growth, because you can always grow and use the shadow function in the positive light. The problem with this, it is the terminology are really complex, it's rigid. The typing is also inaccurate, so you can see the typing grid. I also got so many types, for example, when using it, I got INTJ, ENTP, ENFP, depending on where I put myself, what people also put me, and it's also not scientifically proven. And then we have what we call the cognitive typing typology model from Juan E. Sandoval, which believes that if you have a function activated, you cannot have its opposite. Like if you have SE, you cannot have SI automatically, because sensing in itself is a function. You can only have it in one place. Either it is extroverted or introverted. And by default, if it's one is extroverted, then you have intuition, which goes with sensing, introverted. That's why, according to him, you only have the 4 functions. But the 4 functions express themselves differently. So you can have like different development models. So you can have only, for example, SE activated, while TI and FE and NI might not be activated, which will be different from someone who have the same personality type, but with, let's say, all of them activated, SE, TI, FE, NI. Or someone, let's say, who have only SE and FE activated, who might look even more extroverted than someone who has only SE activated. Or someone who has SE, TI, and NI, who might look a really introverted version of that type. And when we look at, for example, the type, we won't call it ESTP like the Myers-Briggs. He would call it SETI type personality, which is easier also to track down. And so, for example, with the cognitive typology, something I really like about it is that you can see the scale number 2 is voltology. Voltology basically means visual typing. So you type someone not by how they feel or anything like that, or how they think, which is part of metabolism and behavior and psychodynamic analysis. But voltology, you will look at, for example, the way your mouth move or your eyes. Like, for example, if you have like big eyes like this, you probably have NE function. Or if you have like me, for example, this sharp eyes might be SE, a function activated. Or for example, if like me, you move your hands like sideways, you're probably like a PE lead, which means like you probably have an S or an N as your primary functions. Or if you are like more straightforward or more direct or more like like politicians, for example, like Donald Trump, for example, or Barack Obama, they tend to go forward when they speak or when they use their body language. They usually have a G function, which is like an F or a T as their primary function. That's how we use these clues to know the personality. Because that's really useful, because usually you have some people, for example, you can have someone who says like, oh, I'm really introvert and everything like that. But when you see their body language, they're like really expressive. They go to like, in a party, they go towards people. They're really people oriented. But when they ask them, no, I'm like introverted and everything like that. That is not true. And that's why I like with voltology. So you can know someone's personality with, the visual clues. So, for example, just to give you an idea, Martin Luther King, Cesar Millan, and Bruce Lee all have, according to Voltology, the same personality. So they have FE-NI, with FE and NI activated. And what that means is that they have this, almost this guru aspect, being like attracted to people and be people oriented, with the NI being like almost like, philosophical in a sense. So it gives them like, a life coach persona, with personal development and public speaking. And we can argue that the 3 of them are really good at public speaking, personal development, and life coaching. Even Martin Luther King, for example, giving advice to the young people, against civil rights and stuff like that. So he has this aura. But the limits of this model is that each one still has their own personality regardless. So, for example, Martin Luther King is really interested in politics, ministry work, and civil rights, while Cesar Millan, for example, is a drug trainer and a life coach. While Bruce Lee is into martial art movie making. So, despite having the same personality, there's still differences between them. So that's why personality is really a complex science, because even though we can categorize certain people, they still have their own differences. And so it is accurate typing and a transparent methodology, and allows for individuality. But the problem with this is like it's still a context-based typing. So what I mean by that is like, for example, when I talk about the mouth moving, something like this, sometimes it could be just human anatomy. So you might think someone is a certain personality, but in reality, it's just, for example, his eyes might be naturally falling this, but it doesn't mean he has, for example, SI in his personality, just like that's the way he looks. So that's the limits of it. It is complex and time consuming to type someone or type yourself is really difficult. And again, it is not scientifically proven, unlike the ocean model. And then I have to talk about very briefly about the Enneagram. So the Enneagram, the positive aspect of it is like it focuses on motivation. So if you want to know someone's motivation, it is a really good model, and it is dynamic with growth. So for example, 1 can integrate with 4, 7, I can't really remember. I think it's with 7. So, so you had this element, you have the wings aspect. So it's really good for determining someone's motivation. Or for example, when I like to say to some people, it's really good when you are like a script writer and you want to write a script, a character. It's really good to to use the Enneagram to write their motivations, their desire, their fears. It's really good. The problem is you have overlap traits. So for example, number 2 and number 6 kind of really similar. 2, 6, and 8. Or for example, number 1 and let's say number 7, they're really similar. For example, number 4 and 5, or number 3 and 5 can be really similar to a certain extent. One is like specialist, but the other one is achiever, but someone can be achiever and a special at the same time. So yeah. So we're going to do like a very quick test. I know we are running a bit short on time, but you can see you have like 4 models here, and maybe someone can tell me for each one what it is. Maybe like raise a hand, or if you feel comfortable, maybe type in the chat, even though I couldn't see it for some reason. Or you can just unmic yourself again, speak. Yeah.
I'll read out the chat
Yeah.
when answers come in the chat for one.
Yeah.
Any answers from
So
the
for example,
group at all?
ESTP, like with the letter format, what do you think it is?
I might be wrong here, but the 1W2, is that the
Yeah.
one you just spoke about with the pentagram and everything,
Wing.
and how they all work together and some
Yeah,
are
the Enneagram.
the same?
Yeah,
That's the one. Yeah.
that's actually a correct answer. Yeah. But before I show all the answers, maybe about the other trees, maybe have an idea.
So yes, ESTP is essentially Myers-Briggs.
Yes. And for example, what do you think is the functions, for example? No one? All right. So I would go through it. So yeah, indeed. So it's the Myers-Briggs or the MBTI. So when you see letters like this, automatically, or when you see someone typing with letters, so E, extrovert, S, sensing, T, thinking, it's the Myers-Briggs. The function is the 8 function, which was developed by Carl Jung. So when you see, for someone talking about SETIFENI, this kind of letter combination is the function, the 8 functions. And then you have the Enneagram, was correctly guessed by Samuel. And then we have the Hippocrates model we talked before. But what I just talked now is personality traits, the one in below. Personality in itself has many layers. So you have values and worldview. Someone with the same personality might have different. Someone might be conservative. Someone might be progressive. Someone might be religious. Someone might be atheist. Someone might be like open to experience. Someone might be not. So the worldview, like someone might be a positive worldview on people. Someone might not have a positive view on people. So you have values, you have interests also, like someone might be interested in football, someone might be interested in basketball, academic, not academic. So for example, people might be more interested in basketball, football. I'm interested maybe more in academics. I like football, for example. So you see, there's different combinations. For example, I'm not interested in golf, but my personality can be interested in golf, for example. Just give an idea. Abilities, and this has to do with, for example, the type of intelligence. So for example, in my case, I have a visual intelligence, but someone could have a linguistic intelligence, or for example, a physical, or we call like a kinesthetic intelligence. So like they know how to use their body, for example. And there's also the neuro condition. If someone is neurotypical, for example, or like neurodiverse with, like, let's say autism, ADHD, dyslexia, this is also a layer of someone's personality. And so, to recap, so we have the Hippocrates, the 8 functions, Myers-Briggs, and the ocean model. So what is the autism spectrum very quickly? So it is the easiest way to define it, because there's so many definitions of it, but the easiest way to define it, or at least to have elements of it. So you have difficulty communicating or social interactions. Not all people with autism have that, but it is something consistent with autism. Difficult communicating in social interaction. Restrictive or repetitive behavior. So it could be like, so for example, having a routine, or like, maybe restrict yourself from doing certain things. So that could be part of autism. And hyper and hypersensitivity. So for example, it could be like hyper when it comes to listening to like the audio aspect, or for example, with like the type of tissue, for example, with like some people have problem with like cotton, for example, that might not wear cotton. Or some people might be hypersensitive, that have lower sensitive. Some people might, for example, for me, I'm not autistic, or I didn't test for autism, but I know one thing about me is like, when it comes to listening, I can listen like pretty well. But when, for example, I speak to someone and there's a music background, I will have hyper listening, like hypersensitive when it comes to listening. I won't be able to listen to no one, because I don't, something to do with, for example, the way my brain might work. That's why I'm not sure about the autism, but this is one of the things that people with autism have. And for example, if we go back to Jack, for example, if we point out his personality, so he has like the physical aspect. He's curious about people, so he has the SE part. He also have FE, so like he's really sociable, empathic. So that would be his personality according to the Voltology. When we try to type in with that minute of clip, but there's also a layer of autism to it. So the reason I talked about the hyper and hyper sensitivity is that maybe he also have hyper empathy as one of the senses as within autism. So it might be like, because one of the cliche about autism is that they don't have empathy at all. They have a problem with interaction, and therefore they have hypersensitive when it comes to empathy and understanding others. Some autistic people have that, but a lot of people also don't have that. So this could be a reason, like, someone can be autistic and still have good communication with people, but still have like hyper empathy, or he might also have like restrictive or repetitive, behavior, which is the reason why he might be on the autism spectrum. So now the relationship with autism and personality, and that's the interesting part about it, is that autism, 80% of autism cases come from genetics, according to research, and personality, because personality research is really limited. We estimate between 30 and 60% of it being heritable. So for example, me, the fact that I have a real loud voice is the same thing as my dad. So I must have inherited that from my dad. And even like in terms of like, the way I move my hands, the way I speak, the way I like walk, a lot of it from my dad, a lot of it come from my mom, some of it come from my grandparents. So we know that a lot there's an element of it that come from genetics. So now the question is, that we want to ask with this, and things to reflect on, what's the impact of personality in the diagnosis of neurodiversity? And what I mean by that is that we have seen like, there's different type of personality, but sometimes a personality trait can be mistaken as neurodiversity, and vice versa. Someone with neurodiversity can be mistaken as a personality trait, and that's the problem with the lack of research within personality sphere within like psychology. So you have a lot of research on medical psychology and all that stuff, but not on personality in itself. And this could cause a lot of problem for the neurodiversity community. So you can have people with SE, for example, or NE, especially NE, that are really creative and everything like that. So they can like, be really like, active, really curious and everything like that, but they might mistaken themselves with having ADHD, and vice versa with people with ADHD mistaking themselves with having NE function. In reality, they might not have it at all, but they might have ADHD. So you might have a certain number of people that might, and therefore with neurodiversity, when in reality they might not. I'm pretty sure it's a small number, but also have the opposite effect, where people have they think it is a personality and they have this personality and they stick with it, religiously, when in reality they might have ADHD, or they may have autism, or they may have dyslexia or something like this. And they might go undiagnosed for a long time because they think it's just a personality trait. So that's something to reflect on, maybe. And another thing is there like a genetic relationship between both neurodiversity and personality? So like, for example, we know that neurodiversity is transmitted genetically, but for example, is it caused because something genetically was transmitted because of personality? Like, for example, personality trait has been transmitted, and because of that trait being activated, does it also automatically activate a neurodiversity gene, for example, or not? That's something we have no answer to, certainly not me, because the research on it is really, really limited, but we hope that one day we might have something about it. I hope I didn't go over time with this, but thank you very much for your attendance and for listening to me. And yeah, if you have any question, I would be really happy to answer you and to, to talk and discuss this topic.
Thank you very much, Bilal, for a very illuminating discussion in terms of personality and autism. Through your presentation, I was actually reflecting on essentially what you said in regards to the fact that people may somewhat take personality traits and somewhat assume they may be neurodivergent, where it could be a personality trait, which I think in terms of a screening sense may sort of create an influx of people getting screened, because they're using the personality trait to somewhat dictate in terms of their view that they may be neurodivergent. For example, let's say the classical myth of introvertism and autism, which, as we know, not all autistic people are introverted. They may use that as a sort of mechanism of wanting to be screened for autism when it could be just the personality trait of introvertism. Is there